Delegates at the Musa Dladla Regional Conference in KwaZulu-Natal have now elected a new leadership which includes top officials who were nominated from the floor during the conference itself. Musa Cebekhulu and Mhlongo were part of the so-called third way and were not necessarily part of what seemed to be the dominant slates. This region is one of the largest in KZN, and the new leaders are deemed to be part of those rejecting the leadership of the current president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa. Ziyanda Ngcobo is our senior politics reporter who's watching all of this for you now. She joins us live from Mtubatuba. And Ziyanda, let's better place the outcomes of this conference, given what's at stake come December.
Absolutely, Ayanda. In fact, I want to take you a step back and talk about just how robust the nominations process was during this Musa Dladla conference. In fact, something happened here that I haven't seen in a very long time, and that's, names being nominated from the floor during conference, and those names actually emerging as the new leaders. You'll recall just yesterday, Ayanda, you and I were talking about this race for becoming chairperson being between Mhlongo and Cebekhulu, the wife of Senzo Mkhunu, who's a CR loyalist of the current president of the ANC. And then, we then got a hint from NEC member Nathi Mteto to say, in fact, it would seem that this conference is rejecting, this issue of slates, because if you look at the names that have come out in this new leadership, Ayanda, you'll see that it's a mixture of names coming from the various slates. And I remarked yesterday that all these four slates, there was a lot of duplication. So for an example, on the Mhlongo slate, he was running for chairperson, and Musa Cebekhulu was running as deputy chair. And then Musa Cebekhulu himself had his own slate running and had the name of someone else as a deputy chair, and Cebekhulu, and so it goes. And so what happened yesterday is that the elections agency, which usually oversees the running of elections within the ANC, said that, Musa Cebekhulu, I beg your pardon, Mhlongo and Cebekhulu had been duly nominated by the branches. They'd reached a threshold, and that they were now opening up an opportunity for this to be opened up from the floor. And once it was opened up from the floor, they needed at least more than 83 votes, because there were 329 voting delegates, and it seemed Musa Cebekhulu reached that threshold. The same goes with Phiwa Mhlongo, who was nominated from the floor to become deputy chair, and he's now the new deputy chair within this region. I'm talking about all these things, Ayanda, because it speaks to what the branches have been saying, that amandla semasebeni, the power lies within the branches. And going into the national conference in 2022, I couldn't help but think about the fact that there are so many people who are saying there's no clear contender for President Cyril Ramaphosa in the race to the 55th national conference. But what we've seen here in Musa Dladla is something that one might have to look out for, that whilst we may not know about a third way or even a fourth way, that such is possible, and that the branches now have chosen a Musa Cebekhulu, have chosen a Phiwa Mhlongo, despite them not being a part of the dominant slates that were being spoken about in the run-up to this conference.
It certainly does throw a lot up into the air, doesn't it, Ziyanda? But there are several steps before we get to December. For one, we need to first get through the provincial elective conference, which is set to take place, I think it's July. How is the outcome of Musa Dladla region set to affect how that goes?
It's going to affect it quite a lot, Ayanda, because one, it's not clear who exactly at this stage. There's several names that are being touted who will be going up against the current chair, Ziyanda Ngcobo. The ANC Women's League in this province has already nominated Musa Dladla. But again, Ayanda, you see, what now this conference has reminded me of is the fact that whilst we could be throwing around many names, the branches of the ANC could decide decide something completely different once they actually get to conference, which is exactly what happened here at the Musa Dladla region. But also, Ayanda, the KwaZulu-Natal province is, of course, very critical if you're looking at the numbers, if the current state of play is anything to go by for anyone who would want to go up against President Cyril Ramaphosa, and for, those who are bidding for Ramaphosa to come back for a second term. The Eastern Cape, Northern Cape and Mpumalanga chairpersons at the very least have expressed their intention to throw their weight behind Ramaphosa. But again, what will the branches do once they get to conference? Will we see a surprise name such as Dr. Zweli Mkhize, perhaps Lindiwe Sisulu being thrown and brought in at the last minute? Will they bring in another candidate at the last minute? This is exactly then, what this conference has done. And if then, other comrades within the ANC see and look to what has happened here in Musa Dladla, we could see something completely different going into the provincial conference in July and as well as in, December 2022. You'll know that there are many analysts who are saying it's quite clear that Ramaphosa will take it, but perhaps there's something we don't know, that there is a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations, because the critique here has been that, well, why hasn't any other faction, touted a name to outrightly and outwardly to go up against the president of the party? But many will tell you that that's not how things go. It must come from the branches, and it seems to be a rejection, of what we've been seeing. It seems lately there's been a top-down approach. It's only been the chairpersons of these provinces that have pronounced support for President Ramaphosa. What are the branches saying? And it seems that now, again, Amandla Semaseben, it must be a ground-up kind of approach. And it's going to be very interesting going into that provincial conference, the biggest region of the ANC, bringing the biggest numbers for the organization. How will they vote? Which leaders will they elect? And where do those leaders sit in the run-up to the national conference?
Never a dull day in ANC politics. What we're seeing take place there, Ziyanda, clearly suggesting some kind of disconnect between the leaders of the organization in the top brass and what's actually taking place on the ground. Thanks for helping us connect the dots. Ziyanda Ngcobo is our senior politics reporter, live to us there from Mtubatuba, watching the Musa Dladla elective conference.